It is good to be with you all. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Give me 1 second to get set up. Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Angela. Again, my name is Robert Monson. And as I get started today, I want to give a shameless plug for a book that I helped to develop. Thank you. With Enfleshed, called Soft Words for Hard Days, Enfleshed Disability Wisdom. And so this collection came together with disabled and queer people who desired to write a resource from our lived experiences across the disability spectrum. And so we desired to think about what words do we need to have for ourselves? What emotions do we need to have for ourselves? And so we wrote everything from letters to our Uber delivery driver to, um, yeah, there's a lot of rage. There's thoughts on pursuing softness. And so we wanted it to be as expansive as disability is, right? And so in the last beautiful session that I got to sit in on, you all were talking about inclusive disabled spaces. So soft words for hard days. And then the other book that I would recommend here is a book I didn't write, but I have benefited from, and I give it to all of the friends who love me. It's called Autistic and Black: Our Experiences of Growth, Progress, and Empowerment. Okay, so let me just make sure the clicker works too. No. I'm glad. Oh. There we go. Okay, awesome. Okay, we're here. So I want to start our time together by reading the abstract to this presentation out loud. Although it may be obvious, I want to read these words as a grounding for what we will do here over the next hour together. Also, I believe that hidden within my abstract are my commitments and who I am. They're hidden behind each word. So I wrote, this session explores the layers of disability and marginality in the lives of those who are disabled. Layers here points to complex personhood and the reality that disability and embodied wisdom presents itself differently across social locations. Drawing upon the rich imagery of Toni Morrison's famous novel, Beloved, we will consider together the vast potential of disabled people when they, we, us, are allowed to experience the full range of our emotions and are allowed to speak for ourselves. Just as baby Suggs sat in a forest clearing and gathered together the multiply marginalized for the sake of perceiving, emoting, and sharing wisdom, we will create space to consider how we can best make inclusive beliefs emerge beyond ableism, beyond racism, beyond homophobia. Thought partners for this session emerged from Sammy Schock, Cole Arthur Riley, Lamar Hardwick. Hey, okay, amen in the house. Turn to your neighbor. No, just kidding. That's not me. So Lamar Hardwick, Frederick Joseph, and my favorite rapper, Megan Thee Stallion. Okay. Oh, hey, this is lively. It's jumping today. So who am I? First, I want to give an image description that I was told to give at the front end. Sorry, Angela. I am a 6'1", Black, relatively young man, 41 years old. Yeah, Black man. So that's me. And I'm wearing a black, white, and gray striped shirt. So I am a Black disabled theoethicist that does work at the intersections of race, gender, and body analysis. In a nutshell, as a theoethicist, I utilize sacred texts for the foundation of my work. The sacred texts, you notice it's plural, for me that are important to do the work that I do is the Bible, Black literature and poetry, Black music. And these are just some of the texts that I look at to think about God, the divine, and our ties to one another in community. My work centers the complex lives of Black disabled folks as they seek to make sense of a world that largely excludes and terminates them and us. I am ever curious of the spiritualities that uphold Black disabled peoples and the barriers to thriving that seem to be rooted into the very fabric of the world that we exist in. I am disabled in a variety of ways. My relationship to disability is complicated. Hey. Uh, and in those disabilities, now I am unashamed to name, but for the sake of today, I will illuminate that I have mental and physical disabilities that hinder me in this disabling apparatus that I call America. Most importantly, I am a storyteller. So I'm going to tell some stories today that seeks to understand the stories of others, the stories that make us individually and collectively. I believe that stories are powerful meaning-making tools and serve, again, as sacred texts for the lives of so many of us, even if one disagrees with the content of those sacred texts, right? So we are all a collection of stories. These stories largely shape our ethics and the ways that we define boundaries, communities, and even God. So my aims in this talk are simple, at least to me. Number one, I want to make my ancestors and other Black people proud as I speak in the pulpit. That's important to me. Number two, I want to explore, as I said earlier, the complex personhood of disabled individuals and the unique embodied wisdom they offer, especially Black people. I want to think with you all on how we can create space for understanding, for generative beliefs and actions that emerge from disabled voices as those voices are centered and affirmed. So I center my work on the least of these, as the New Testament would phrase it. A question that I want to leave as a gentle landing for you all throughout my talk is, what does it mean to embody knowledge that is rooted in lived experiences of disability? I'll say that again. What does it mean to embody knowledge rooted in lived experiences of disability? So I will give some context, right? The title of this session is Enfleshing Disability Wisdom in the Clearing of Belief. And so the foundational imagery for our time today that will be helpful for our understanding, you can find in Toni Morrison's book, Beloved. Right, in the book, she marks the clearing. There's this space set apart in the woods as a sacred, transformative space, right? And so I'm going to read a passage from the clearing. If it helps you to engage, you can close your eyes. You can get up and walk. You can lie down, whatever is helpful for you. When warm weather came, baby Suggs Holy, followed by every Black man, woman, and child who could make it through, took her great heart to the clearing. A wide open place cut deep in the woods, nobody knew for what, at the end of the path known only to deer and whoever cleared the land in the first place. In the heat of every Saturday afternoon, she sat in the clearing while the people waited among the trees. After situating herself on a huge flat-sided rock, baby Suggs bowed her head and prayed silently. The company watched her from the trees. They knew she was ready when she put her stick down. Then she shouted, "Let the children come," and they ran from the trees towards her. "Let your mothers hear you laugh," she told them, and the woods rang. The adults looked on and could not help smiling. "Then let the grown men come," she shouted. They stepped out one by one from among the ringing trees. "Let your wives and your children see you dance," she told them, and ground life shuddered under their feet. Finally, she called the women to her. "Cry," she told them, "for the living and the dead just cry." And without covering their eyes, the women let loose. It started that way: laughing children, dancing men, crying women, and then it got mixed up. Women stopped crying and danced. Men sat down and cried. Children danced, women laughed. Children cried until, exhausted and riven, all and each lay about the clearing, damp and gasping for breath. In the silence that followed, baby Suggs Holy offered up to them her great big heart. She did not tell them to clean up their lives or go and sin no more. She did not tell them they were the blessed of the earth, its inheriting meek or its glory bound pure. She told them that the only grace that they could have was the grace that they could imagine. That if they could not see it, they would not have it. "Here," she said, "in this here place we flesh. Flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass." And she charges them, love it hard. Okay. So baby Suggs, in her physical and mentally disabled personhood, invites those who have been most harmed by the world to come into the clearing. She invites them to flesh out their emotions as she speaks specific words of self-affirmation and truth to them. The clearing, and this is a depiction that I have here, and baby Suggs on the screen, just for image description. So the image description, there is a purple background and mountains and a tree in the foreground. And at the top of the image, there is an older Black woman with gray hair. So again, the clearing becomes a site of lament, a site of joy, and a site of shared humanity. And I hope that we can see the beauty of this Black-filled clearing and ponder the types of spaces that we build, that we create. Robert, why is this important? Great, thank you for asking. Why? Thanks, I like it when you talk back to me. So when I set out to write this talk, first and foremost in my mind was hurt and frustration that I'm afflicted with, in certain types of disabled communal spaces. Although we know that disability comes in many forms, I have often experienced universal language when, I'm sorry to do this, I'm holding your hand when I say this, when certain types of white activists and scholars say things and use language such as, quote, "We know in the disabled community, ... end quote. Okay, okay. Preacher. And they proceed to say something, I roll my eyes internally and try to push through it, that I am intimately aware has no relation to most Black disabled peoples, many of whom aren't even able to fully access the word disability. right? So how can we use universal language when we all haven't even come to the starting point? Many of whom have just been granted a type of personhood legally in the United States and are forced to perform Black excellence, and a popular term in Black culture is Black magic, in very ableist ways. For context, I like to tell people that I am the first person in my family born with full civil rights in America, right? So how can we use universal language? When I am in the larger disabled communal space, I often have to choose between my Blackness or my queerness or my disabilities, or even my economic status. The truth is that it will never be that easy for me to define myself as disabled in community. I don't have the luxury to segment myself. I will always contextualize my life through my Blackness because I live in a society that necessitates it. So I think of the disabled scholar Angel Love Miles. So at the bottom of this image, there is a picture of Angel Love Miles, a Black woman in a wheelchair, who has spina bifida. And when asked for her to choose between being Black, a woman, and disabled, she rejects such notions outright. When asked whose side is she on, this is beautiful, she answers mine. I'm on my side. This is powerful language because I can't describe the loneliness I feel among much of those who do disability work in the academy. I can't describe how much I have to leave outside of a room so that I can get a crumb of understanding. Today, I hope that we will collectively learn, sorry, that was a bit heavy, to learn how wide the table of disability is. It's a beautiful table. It's beautiful to be here with you all in the ways that you are imagining and talking about and advocating for disabled lives, right? So the table is wide, right? And hopefully be able to pause long enough to realize that certain identities are not perceived among us. They are not heard or felt. They are not served well by the current landscape of disability theologies and ethics. So disability, we know, I'm preaching to the choir, we know it's not monolithic. We know this, right? We say this all the time. But how often do we create space for complex narratives? Intersectional disability studies has to continue to be deepened, right? I believe it was the scholar Christopher Bell who remarked many years ago about the whiteness of disability studies and the irony of having to create another lens just to include all the others, right? So I turned to the words of Sammy Shock in, yeah, we got go. I love Sammy Shock. Okay, in her work in the book Black Disability Politics. So this wonderful scholar, who among many other notable works that she's done, does archival history on the ways that Black communities, especially groups like the Black Panthers, were ahead of the game, so to speak, as they established communal care practices that helped and collaborated with disabled folks. On disability studies and politics, she says, and I have this quote on the slide, I define Black disability politics as anti-ableist arguments and actions performed by Black cultural workers. Black disability politics are often performed in solidarity with disabled people writ large. But the articulation and enactment of Black disability politics do not necessarily center traditional disability rights language and approaches such as disability, pride, or civil rights inclusion. Instead, they prioritize an understanding of disability within the context of white supremacy. So this is where I point back to the disabling apparatus called America. And how often do we come into disabled spaces and explicitly name the context of white supremacy? White supremacy is at work in this country and has since our inception been disabling bodies and minds. And capitalism necessitates that we continue to do so. That is right. So I want to give you a few statistics that I will read. In this image, there is the approximate number of adults with a disability by ethnicity and race in America. And I draw your attention to Hispanic people in America, and these are some data we have, right? It's hard to know, but 1 in 6 are reported to have some sort of disability, where Asian peoples, 1 in 10 are reported to have some disability. And Black people in America, 1 in 4 are reported to have some sort of disability. Right, and here's another image just in a prettier way, but this is a image with mostly brown people, and I will direct your attention again to 1 in 4 Black people having some sort of disability. So with the pride that I encounter in much of disabled spaces I work with, I can't help but take hope. I have hope that this gathering has happened, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. Right? There is profound hope in the stories that we are making together and the strands of stories that we are making together. And I can't help but nuance the conversation. There can be a disconnect when we don't recognize the ways that this country has and continues to actively disable Black Americans. Police brutality, environmental racism, think Flint, Michigan, and interlocking systems of oppression make Black Americans disabled and their children disabled, both in the mind and in the body and even in the spirit. For some, the question becomes, why should I be proud of what was caused by neglect and bigotry? America's mission, encoded in the spiritualities, especially certain types of Christianities, of this country is to harm and destroy the other, or put differently, to convert the other. Because of this, not everyone can be proud of having a disabled body mind. Is that okay? Right? We must allow the disabled peoples to speak for themselves, as I said earlier, to define themselves for themselves, as the wonderful Audre Lorde was known to say. In our meetings and in our scholarship, we must engage lives that we disagree with so that we don't misrepresent unity. In our fight to dismantle the deficit model, which we should be dismantling every day, we must be careful to not silence those who, through their lived experiences and through their disabilities and locations, contain sites of critique, profound wisdom, troubling, and historical analysis. I want to go back to the clearing for a few moments. So let us return there. Again, because I believe that imagination helps to unlock powerful truths. In the clearing, the sacred command to cry, laugh, dance, and to love one's own flesh is powerfully resonant. And I ask in this clearing space, we're all seated in the clearing, we're all there. How can we change a world out there, outside of the clearing, if we don't have proper spaces in here? What does it mean to create such a clearing in academic? A lot of my work is in academia. How do we create these clearings in academic spaces, social spaces, our spiritual context, both for disabled individuals and especially those disabled ones who are marginalized in multiple ways? How do we create these spaces? Do our gatherings allow for the full range of emotions that come when we create clearings? Right? Do we have enough tissues for those who weep, right? I'm a crier on most days that end in Y. Are you prepared? I don't see any tissues here. No, so um, I challenge you to spend concentrated time in different realms of the disabled. Take some time. I often ask people to do imaging work and imaging exercises for me when I speak and when I teach. And I ask them a series of questions. First, I ask them how many Black disabled voices they regularly quote. Then I ask them how many young, maybe I wouldn't even be young, so how many young Black disabled scholars are they aware of and do they quote? Then I ask how many Black disabled celebrities they know. How many can they name? I am never shocked at the responses that I get, or I should say the lack of responses. It gets really sheepish in the room, and I see people get ashamed, and the point of that imaging work is not for shame or to point out some deficiency among us. We're all in this together, right? Shame is not our portion. My point in asking this is to bring the awareness that if you cannot perceive us, how can we dismantle ableism together? How? If you don't know that we exist, how can we do it? The answer is we can't. So since we're in this clearing together, I want to bring a couple thought partners to muse with us as faces of Black disability. And these might be unusual thought partners, but I think they are concise thought partners. And so I will name them and describe their image. So at the bottom left of this slide, we have Cole Arthur Riley. And she's a Black woman with glasses and long hair. And what I love about her is how in her work, she embraces vulnerability. She talks about spiritual liberation and storytelling. She talks about authentic selfhood, especially as it relates to her disabled experience. Above her, we have Lamar Hardwick. He's a Black man with glasses and a beard, a wonderful beard, with salt and pepper in it, like moi. And what I love about his work is he brings faith, disability, and finding divine purpose and belonging and weaves them together in order to make stories about God and disability and faith. Then at the bottom right corner, we have a smooth brother, Frederick Joseph, who through his poetry and his work on manhood, soft masculinities, and disability, he challenges systemic oppression and advocates for marginalized voices to be heard. And at the top, again, I told you he was bringing Megan Thee Stallion. We have Megan Thee Stallion, a Black woman. She's got lots of bangles on and long fingernails. And what I love about her is she brings the power of self-expression to her rapping and her advocacy work. She brings authenticity and confidence in one's own truth. I would play Hot Girl Summer as a metaphor for embodied joy and agency, but I don't think this is the time or the place. This will be a whole different part. Yeah, okay, hey, this might be a different party, the after party. But what I love about Megan Thee Stallion, more than the music, is this powerful, sensual rapper has been vocal about her own mental illness, about her anxieties, and the trauma of losing close family members. on top of all that she has had to encounter in her life, she has been subjected to intense misogynoir and violence. And so I think when I perceive her, I think, what can we learn from and with her in this clearing of belief? So there's a transformative power that we know when we enflesh wisdom. So again, Cole Arthur Riley this year fleshed one of my favorite books that stays with me, near me like a blanket. She says, as someone who is made of more doubt than faith, I find that Christians tend to want to talk to me about salvation. They seem quite concerned with the future of my faith, but they make the mistake of showing little interest in my present conditions. If asked to choose, I want a God who is someplace. If asked to choose, I want a God who is someplace. Yes, we as Black disabled people and as disabled communities at large, we need a God who is someplace. We need a God that has strong answers to all the pains and the griefs that we bear, right? We need a God that is specific, particular, one who listens to what we have to say, who perceives what we have to say, as we work towards a theology and an ethic that binds us all together in the cords of liberation and loving kindness. We need communities that reflect the someplaceness of God as well. As I get ready to close my time and open it up for Q&A, I unapologetically am bringing forth the wisdom of those Black people whom I love and respect, because I wholeheartedly believe that when we embrace disability wisdom, when we glean from the lessons of others, it benefits everyone. This isn't about segregation, this is about liberation, right? Our communities benefit when we move beyond advocating for just inclusion for disabled peoples, but also about a more complete understanding of humanity and what it means to be human. Who gets to call themselves human in the eyes of the law and in our churches, in our pulpits, in our classrooms, ours and everyone else's. It's hard to know when we gather together in a place like this, what do we prioritize? This is something I've talked with Angela about. Do we prioritize policing people's speech first? Do we call out the ableism that's inherent in language? Undoubtedly, in this very message, I have stumbled into ableism, which is never my aim, never my heart, but I do, right? Even as I seek to evolve. So do we prioritize policing people's speech first? What about the sheer number of disabled people who are killed at alarming rates by the police? I've done a lot of justice work around police brutality and around the disabled people of all ethnic groups who are killed by the police. It is a staggering amount. It's a staggering number that chills me and makes me frightened to walk around at night. So when we gather together, who gets to decide our priorities? I contend that together we all decide, but we all decide and should decide centering those who are least in our midst, who are deemed least by other people, but who are worthy of love and affection in our midst. So as we close and open up for some questions and answers, or at least hopefully answers, because I don't know, I want to consider the ongoing journey that is knit within the title of my talk. To consider the ongoing journey that is enfleshing disability wisdom. I want to invite you again to consider how you individually, corporately, in your spheres of influence can contribute to creating clearings in your spaces. and I leave you with a few tools that may help you. Somebody talked about the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Hey, Autistic and Black, which I talked about. And a lovely edition that I've just finished reading is The Body is Not an Apology. The Power, oh, hey, okay. Okay, let's go out for drinks, y'all. The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. Amen and amen. Questions? I don't know how we're going to do this, but questions, thoughts? Also, thank you both.
People can go to the mics, and if we have questions online, Angela will be reading them aloud. Do we have any from our virtual participants yet? Go ahead.
Oh, I had a question. I'm
Yes.
kind of a numbers guy. So when you showed all those numbers of people with disabilities and all that, of different races and stuff, I wondered, have you looked at the those same numbers for congenital disabilities and compared it with acquired disabilities?
I have not, but
Okay.
I think, hey, I haven't done my dissertation yet. So thank you for being, thank you for helping me. What's your name? Kevin Pettit. I will give you a shout out in my dissertation. Hey, thank you.
I think that the numbers of the Black people tend to get acquired disabilities because of their occupations more so than white people.
I believe so. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I love it.
Hi, thank you for that. I have a follow-up question, actually. My first is, as someone who's in the room, there are very few of us who are non-white. It really struck me that you had these statistics because I work in the space and I'm always intrigued and trying to really corroborate our statistics with, what's available.
Yes.
First, I have two questions. First question is, what is the source of this data?
I believe, and it might be in the notes, I believe it's an image from the CDC
Okay.
that I acquired over the past 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll
And-
make sure to share that.
And then the second question is, who's Asian?
Now, I didn't say these were awesome. Like, these are how they mark these things.
Yeah,
So
okay.
yes,
So that,
yes.
knowing the answer to the first one, I can
Yes.
gather. And no blame. I appreciate the numbers. We appreciate the stats. We do a lot of these studies ourselves within the Muslim community. And so, for example, an Arab Muslim is white,
Yes.
a South Asian Muslim is brown.
Mhm.
So Asian is not Asian, but again, no blame, but it's
Yeah, no,
intriguing.
right.
So
This
I
is-
wanted to
mean,
know.
The
Thank you.
CDC need the blame, but I brought it so I could take some. I think that what I desire to put some statistics to it. Well, one is because I don't only deal with stats and numbers, but I do. And I'm a cultural worker that takes what people are saying about disability in their communities, right? And how they view it. I actually would problematize Black as well, because I don't know how y'all are gathering that. And I would venture to say, and here's why this is important for me. Often when I am speaking to and about disability, even with friends, it is so often that I'm talking with someone and they can describe fibromyalgia, ADHD, arthritis, and all these things. And when they get done after hearing me talk, they will say, wait, do you think I'm disabled? I'm like, how do you define that? How do you, and I think what is sad to me, especially people of color, there is an inability and almost a trauma response that I see at being able to name themselves as disabled. And I see such a hardship. I was speaking at an AR regional, and a person of color that will remain nameless got upset over the word disabled because the ways that Christianity and spirituality has made disability antithetical to God. I would probably say the number is higher among Black peoples, but yeah. Hey, come on. Hey, all right. Let pass me is where's my advisor? So I can be done with this. Okay, thank you all. Next question.
Check in with Angela again.
Several people who are expressing their gratitude, saying we have too many questions, all mixed up. I really appreciate your presentation. Isabella is saying that this echoes their experience as an Asian woman, an international student with disability and doing theology of disabilities. So she is learning a lot from you. And Paul says that in the work he is doing around disability in Leeds in the UK, he has often struggled to engage with Black majority churches, specifically around disability, and even when
Yes.
he knows multiple people who are disabled in the church. So he
Yes.
wonders if you have any explanation for that or suggestions that might help.
Yeah, the explanation is a tender one for me because I realize, so a person I admire, Dr. Gary Green out of United Theological in Minnesota, does a lot of work on the construction of the Black body, especially the construction of the Black body as beast and the ways that we think about it. And I think the construction and history of Black bodies mixed with messages of certain strands of Christianity has made it a barrier to access to think about being less than perfect in different ways that are different from other parts of the disabled community. And in order to talk about disability among Black people, we have to tell those stories and why people, that word is a non-starter for them. It actually is a non-starter. And so that's why universalizing language pains me, because you don't know that this is a non-starter for certain people of color. And Black people will say a lot of things throughout my childhood. I'm a child of the 80s. And Black old people will say, my nerves is bad. And that is their way of acknowledging that there's something going on within them. Usually, a lot of them have undiagnosed anxiety, and many of them are autistic that they found out later in life. And so I have tried to learn the words and the stories that will help bring people in. And I think that's why I do ethical work that starts in Black literature. So I start with literature, not the Bible, because the Bible causes sometimes Black church congregations to go into a different realm of thinking and submission to God. And if I show them a Black poem by a Black artist, or a work that I use a lot is Sula by Toni Morrison, and I help them find disability in that text, it's easier than trying to convince Black people that spirituality and disabledness can go together. So that's what I would start with. Yeah. Thank you.
That person had a question.
I need a mic brought to
you. Yeah, yeah. Oh.
No, we got it.
Oh.
Thank you.
Now I have multiple mics. Thank you. I first just want to say thank you in general, but specifically you saying your thought about universal language being problematic. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and we have,
Come on.
you're right.
I love that.
Shockingly, we have many issues with the people, older people in the UU church are always saying, how do we get Black people and Hispanic people to come to the church? And then we use a lot of universal language. So,
Which is a barrier to
yes,
access.
absolutely. So I have a lot of thinking to do about that. Thank you. And then my question is a really basic one, because I was trying to write down every single author you named and I failed to do that. Can you, Frederick, what is the surname of?
Oh, Frederick Joseph.
Joseph. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
He wrote a book called Patriarchy Blues that I think is so helpful to think about toxic masculinity and disability combined. He has a unique way to tell stories, I believe. So, next question.
Thank you so much. Really resounded with your work, especially starting with literature. I've got two questions. One is just a curious one, so.
Okay, I'm curious too.
much time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you get closer to the mic for the live stream?
Could you
Sorry,
press the button on it? Make sure you.
it might have got turned off.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay,
Oh,
yes.
there we go.
We're cooking
Um,
with gas now.
yeah,
Let's do this.
So my first question is a curious one, so don't spend too much time on this one. I'm just curious as to why, as an Asian person, 1 in 10, it seems Asians perhaps have less disclosure, or is that less disclosure or less experience? But yeah.
So from my research, from my limited research, it is less disclosure and how do I want to say this? Less disclosure and less diagnostic tools that are expansive enough to recognize disabilities in Asian peoples. And I think one of the problems with the construction of the model minority myth is that often Asian peoples are overlooked in disabled spaces as presenting as able-minded and able-bodied. And I don't think it gives enough expansiveness for Asianness in general. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. My more, I think, pressing question is, you said, I love this quote, how can we dismantle ableism if we don't know they exist?
Mhm.
What are some advice as to ways in our communities we can highlight stories, people, so that, so that can happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of my answer is by doing this imaging work that is uncomfortable for me. It is uncomfortable to go into a largely white room and center my communities. It's very uncomfortable, and the burden being on me to even say that we exist feels in some ways dehumanizing, because I think a lot of the work that I have to do, this is the clearing, the work that I have to do out there, outside of the clearing, is I have to make a case that Black body minds are worthy of dignity and we come in all shapes and sizes. It offends people when I tell them I'm autistic. It offends people when I tell them I have a neurological condition that causes me to be in pain most of the time. And yet, I have to keep reminding people and telling that story because I appear to be perfectly able-bodied. I appear to be, I appear to be in my prime, and yet I have to tell my story over and over and over again to make people understand the ways that disability presents in Black people. And so I think the ways that we can do it together is to hearken unto, for example, when we're teaching in the classroom, sometimes people will contact me and they will, give me one disabled scholar I can throw in here. This is part of the decolonizing movement that we're doing. Like, give me one Black person and give me one disabled person so I can, sprinkle a little goodness on the top of my syllabus. And that's not radical work in 2025. Child wasn't in 2020, but here we are. Radical work would be, if you're going to teach on disability, use all people of a certain, I would love to use all people from the Middle East that are disabled. That is radical work. Radical work would be use all Asian disabled authors. There's enough, right? Like there's enough to fill a whole course. If you're teaching on disability ethics, use only Black people. That's part of the imaging work that cannot just be mine alone, some people's alone. This has to be the work that we have together. Read our work. Listen to our podcast, perceive our podcast, right? And so we are out here, and yeah, so that's what I would say. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Robert. Kathy online, she has a comment that feeds into a question that I have. So Kathy says,
I love this.
Kathy
2
says,
for 1.
your use of call to clearings is powerful. She just listened to MTS thesis presentation where a Black student used the space Hush Harbors, created as a way to think about how we create spaces now for youth, and especially non-binary youth and LGBTQ youth in the Black church, to feel safe in the church. She says it seems that there is a difference to both concepts, clearing versus hush harbor, but it makes sense in the times that we are living to help us connect well and safely in all kinds of bodies and identities. Both concepts seem like the kind of portals we make to be able to enter deeper community with one another.
Mm.
So Robert, you are a poet and a storyteller, and you do a lot of incredible work with novels and movies that everybody should check out. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about where we should start in our storytelling. How do we invite folks in and create ethical spaces where people feel safe showing up as their full, complicated, messy selves?
Oh, this is a great question. Well, anyone, the answer, the Spirit of God. I love this question. Well, first, I have to say to the first, the statement, I benefited so much recently from, and I am blanking on this person's name, from Baylor, but there is a womanist architect who does. Elise Edwards, thank you. Yes, yeah, and I knew you're from Baylor, so thank you. Elise Edwards does such beautiful work around created spaces. And I got to do a panel with her in which she talks about every like physical space that you're in is created for a purpose. And largely that purpose is not serving the need of the whole. And so in one of her books, she talks about how can we co-create spaces that speak to inclusiveness and speak to the glory of God in community. So I have to shout her out. Where do we start? I think we start with lament. If I'm very honest, I think part of the questions that are even coming for today, and even the beautiful part of the talk that I heard this morning, we have to say when we gather, who is not here? That actually should paint us in what stories are not here. And so, sheesh, I might cry now because I'm a crybaby. I think when I walk into these spaces, I actively think that, who isn't here? And it does me no good to talk about disability when there's so many kin that are not here from all shapes and sizes and disabilities. Yeah, so I think lament is the first part of our storytelling. And lament usually leads to rage. And I think often we have not created containers for rage. We have informational sessions. We have like sermon sessions. Like, are y'all ready for us to turn some tables over here? No, not at I live. Like don't break anything. I might graduate. But I think if we don't have the containers for that, then how can we say come as you are? Because there's a building of rage that comes sometimes when you think about ableism and what it has robbed you of in these rules, arbitrary rules that we have made. I think of getting accommodations as a graduate student and all the hoops that you have to jump through to prove how disabled you are. And I want to toss some things over in here. It's rage inducing. And so I think rage and lament, if we're truly prepared, though that's the start of telling new narratives. I don't know that we as a people are ready for both of those things, if I'm being honest. I want us to be. I want to be individually, but I don't know that we are collectively.
I just want to kind of think of the positive as well too, because we're talking about all the kinds of things that are negative and in these aspects, and I think that's true. But when we think of the social model of disability, we also think of ways that certain groups can include certain disabilities, and there's certain groups that do that in many ways implicitly without explicitly doing it. Like I was diagnosed with autism in my 30s. I was, I got through the seminary. I was actually ordained a Catholic priest before then and everything. And I kind of failed as a school chaplain. That's what led to my diagnosis because I wasn't picking up the kids' social cues. But the thing is, the clinician, the psychologist, when she diagnosed me, she said, you know what, if you had stayed in computer engineering, which is my degree I was doing before I entered the seminary, you probably would have never gotten a diagnosis and you wouldn't have needed it. Because at least for like an autism level 1, if you're like computer engineering, designing computers for Microsoft or something like that, the kind of environment of that kind of field is inclusive enough. Or if I go to like the model train convention as an autistic person, I don't feel at all disabled. Not because they're explicitly like, hey, we're going to include autistic people, but just because the nature of the model train convention is such that there's enough of us there that everybody just takes this as
A
normal.
clearing, if you will. Yeah, I see it. I see it.
You know, so I think that it's important also to see the positive ways that certain groups kind of have that social model implicitly as well, because, you know, I think of it to a certain extent. I don't think it's the entirety of why Asian are low, but like when I was in computer engineering, East Asians were way overrepresented in my computer engineering class. It wasn't that everyone who's East Asian is there, but East Asians in my city were maybe 10, 20%, but they were 40, 50% of our computer engineering class.
Yeah.
And things like that. And if they're like autism level 1, like me, and they kept going in that field, they might not have ever needed the accommodations because the kind of field implicitly requires it. So I think that it's also to see the positive of some kind of groups like that. So
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for, I've never been to that show, so it might be another clearing I need to check out. I do want to be clear because this happens in some spaces when I'm speaking, that some people say, well, what about the positives? You know, and I want to be clear that being clear about present threat is not the same as negativity. I do have to name that. When I name America as a disabling apparatus, I'm very clear because America as an entity stands between me and thriving and the people that I love. And so it's the rules that we have that disable people, even in a classroom, the ways that we deem engagement in the classroom. I've been in classroom with disabled scholars that were the toughest and most ableist people ever. So I'm like, this class is a quandary, if you will. And so I have to name the backdrop so that we see why sometimes that people are not here in our midst, right? And so why, you know, what are the barriers of access even to this conference, right? So thank you for noticing that. For me, one of my disabilities, autism, I don't believe that it is inherently a disability. What we have constructed makes it a disability. What we have constructed in society. I also have ADHD, but why do we demand a certain type of attention focus for hours and hours and hours, and we make that normal? Well, I'm not disabled because I have ADHD. I am because I live in this world. So yeah. So I think there was a question over here, and then there's some more right here too.
Oh,
Thank you.
good morning, and
morning.
thank you so much for the heart you're sharing with us. Two questions. One is about if we did not talk about disability first, but maybe spoke about liberation, what do you think that would be a more successful engagement as a starting point?
I need all of y'all to be on my dissertation committee. I'm like, we're cooking. I do believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, maybe this is just my jam, but survivor's guilt seems also like some potentially, I'm guessing from the outside and the inside, looking at guilt, survivor's guilt and the grief. I think that at least in the disability communities I've traveled in, which aren't all the disability communities,
Yeah.
people do not want to talk about grief, do not want to talk about pain
Yes,
because it's a very nuanced,
it is.
private taboo. And so I struggle a lot. Your mention of lament really was like, good fuel for me, but the grief of who isn't here, that's hard
It is. Thank you.
because some of them were. We tend to die young. And gosh, I didn't want to cry at the conference, just like I never want to cry at gathering days. If you're an Ilifian, you'll know what I mean. But in the context of Medicaid and expendability, it's just difficult. And I'm sorry. Yay for white tears at a conversation about how.
Your tears are precious to me, at least. I will say that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is painful. And I think I understand the care that goes into creating disabled spaces and know that as we war against disability only meaning pain, only meaning something negative, it's hard to nuance because when you say disabled out there, it's like a bomb goes off and everyone feels that it's something negative just because you're disabled, right? And so I think as we are cultural workers that create spaces, sometimes in the in our energy to say, no, we are beautiful just the way we are. There's no mistake or flaw in you. We don't realize that some of us were flawed by a country that made us this way. And some of us have different disabilities. Some are genetic and some were made just because of where we live. And so how do you co-create a space that can contain joy and grief together? I don't know how to do it, if I'm honest. I'm just here to bring the fact that there are multiple stories here when we gather, right? So thank you for that.
Hello, thank you for all of this.
Yeah, thank you.
As you talked about who isn't in the room, one of the communities dear to me is not in our room and is not in many rooms, and that's people with significant intellectual disabilities and differences in communication. And so I'm curious about your thoughts or experience or studies in how we invite the voices that are hard to hear.
Yeah, right, so there's the activist space, the scholar space, the teacher space, and the poet space, and and then me being just Black and outside. So in all of those spaces, I think something that is revolutionary for me is rather than creating something and then forcing people to fit into what I've created, is to go where those people are. Right. I think maybe the first step in creating an inclusive space is to say, is the first step making them fit into a model that we set as normal, where we have to sit in chairs this way, communicate in this way. I think we can queer what the spaces that we create, and we can say, where y'all be hanging out at, right? And go there. And what if and we won't interrupt you. We will be there with you in solidarity. What if part of a conference is to go where the people already are? It's hard to monetize that, because we try to make money, but I think that that's step one. And then step two, I think is there's a lot of practical examples of inviting them. It's saying, how will we care for them when you come? I think that that's the next step. I talked about my loneliness in the disability space. I've come into spaces that I know I'm not going to be cared for well and I cannot open up. That's hard. How will you ensure that you will take care of me in your space? And so maybe part of the solidarity is saying, here are 3 things we will do to love you well when you come in our space. And I keep thinking about this image from Luke, I think it's chapter 5, where the homies let a man through the roof and into Jesus's presence. And plenty of people say that the miracle was the healing that took place, which is a very ableist take. Right? Like his life was meaningless before he got healed. No, he had a whole life and a whole history. I think a better miracle is that you had 4 men or 4+ men working together without strife. So that's the miracle. And the ability to perceive disability enough to say what is the barrier to healing. And so I think, yeah, I think we create spaces where we say how we're going to take care of people, what our commitment is, and what happens if we fail to do this. That's accountability. What happens if we fail to love you in the 3 ways that we said we would? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. You
Yeah.
have me in tears
Yeah.
too. We are going to wrap up for lunch, so let's thank Robert so much.